I don't hate Donald Trump for being Donald Trump. I hate the policies that he is enacting with these executive orders that, by the way, he didn't design, he didn't investigate, he didn't do homework on, he hasn't read memos or briefings on. This is all
Right.
coming out of Project 2025. And
Mhm.
anybody that thinks that I'm wrong, I I beg you, go read Project 2025. It's a 922-page manifesto on how to destroy America's democracy and turn it into an authoritarian regime. That's
And
just what it is. And they are doing it
it's underway.
one by one. It's a playbook.
This is Black Man Spy.
Welcome to this week's episode of Black Man Spy. I'm Malcolm Nance. I'm the host of Black Man Spy. You might notice that I am in a dull environment with IKEA-like decor, and that I'm wearing my blazer, but with a high collar center zip black wool shirt. That's because I'm in arguably Scandinavia. I am in Copenhagen, Denmark, in the Hellerup section, the swanky Hellerup section of town, doing interviews with people for our next major podcast, which will be a enormous study of Greenland, which is where I've been for the last couple of weeks. But today, I'm going to jump right back into American politics because everything that's happening in America is impacting every one of you. And you go, whoa, Malcolm, this is Black Man Spy. I want to hear about espionage. Well, funny you should mention it. If you got no rights, you might want to worry about espionage being carried out on you, right? If you are going down the street and you see men in unmarked mommy vans with masks pulled over their face with no identifying badges or even their names, and only the word police on you or ICE written on them, like the East German Stasi, like the Argentinian secret police, like the Chilean secret police, you can be essentially kidnapped as an American citizen, thrown into a van, deported to a foreign country. And I understand that that has happened a couple of times in the last week alone. As a matter of fact, there's a famous case of a U.S. citizen was sent to an ICE detention facility, and he was born in the United States, raised in the United States, didn't speak any foreign languages. He just looked a certain way, and it took a week for him to be released from a private prison by ICE when his family showed up with his birth certificate, ID cards, and all that stuff. Everything that occurs in the United States has its impact within the world of Black Man Spy. And don't forget that it was the spy master in chief, the original president of the United States, George Washington, who established and guided and got the Constitution passed and viewed it as a imperfect but inviolable document because we are a nation of laws. And right now, we have lawmakers who don't even know what those laws are. Like I'm looking at you, Christy Nome. You're the one who said you didn't know what habeas corpus was this week. And we're going to discuss that with our next guest, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former attorney, who he was with him for 15 years, day and night. And he is going to lead us through for the next 45 minutes or so an amazing discussion about what is going on in America while I was away. So, with that, let's see what Michael has to say. Welcome to this edition of Black Man Spy, and I want to introduce my good friend and this week's guest, Michael Cohen. I have to read his whole bio here, so bear with me because it's huge. Michael Cohen is principal of Crisis X, a crisis management company. He acted as personal attorney for the former president of the United States, known as Donald J. Trump, and before that was executive vice president for the Trump Organization and special counsel to Donald J. Trump. Since his release from the Otisville Federal Correctional Institution, he has authored the New York Times bestseller Disloyal, a memoir, and Revenge: How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, which is going to need an update when I'm in there. He also hosts the top-rated news podcast Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen, and co-hosts the podcast Political Beatdown, and our Substack Live every
Right.
Thursday with me,
Every
you, and Lev
Thursday.
Parnas, Unleashed, which I like to call Two Felons and a Spy. Welcome to the Black Man Spy podcast. I have my official I'm a host coat on. I'm wearing my collar up. It's Scandinavian style, so I look like I play in a 1980s, electric, a European electric band.
Right, literally
So,
right out of Miami Vice, dude. 1980s Miami Vice.
I
Malcolm
just
Nance.
the
Da-da-da.
glasses are around here somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. Listen, I know your time is precious, and I am just so happy you could come on my podcast. And I love doing Mea Culpa. Mea Culpa is without a doubt one of the best political podcasts out there.
It's
And
done very well. I mean, in fact, we're pretty close to like 500 million downloads, if not
good
already exceeding it.
God.
But then again, I've been doing it now for literally 5 years. Started Mea Culpa, which is also my initials, which is how I came up with the name. But I started it while I was on home confinement, basically so
Mm,
that I can have my voice resonate to America, to continue to warn America of exactly what we see going on right now, every single day, the chaos in DC.
yeah. And to be honest, you quite arguably were the first victim of Donald Trump actually weaponizing the Department of Justice against an individual because of, not just what you did. None of what you did was arguably illegal, but they certainly got it to where they put you in prison, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just prison. They put me back into solitary confinement, making it a
Mm,
total of 51 days. And all for what? Because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right, because I refused to sign a document that was counterfeit by
mhm,
the Department of Corrections, under the auspice and control of the Department of Justice, Bill Barr. And
mm,
I refused to sign a fake federal location monitoring agreement. I was remanded by the marshals after being placed for like 3 hours into a freezer and then sent back up to Otisville, where, thanks again to my attorney, Danya Perry, and many people who jumped on board, filed a habeas petition, right? A
mhm,
habeas corpus petition. And I bring this up for obvious reasons to
mhm,
those people that follow the news. We filed this habeas petition, which, by the way, was granted. Something a lot of people don't know. I'm going to just digress for a quick second. Tens
right.
of thousands of habeas petitions are filed each and every year,
Mhm,
and like less than 2% actually are granted. So the reason that I say that is because mine was such a clear violation that Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein determined that the actions by Bill Barr under the Trump administration in the unconstitutional remand of me was retaliatory, because I
mm,
refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right and not publish the book Disloyal, which turned out to be #1 on the New York Times bestseller, and then speak to the media about that book. That's what it was all about. I mean, it's truly hard to imagine, but I bring up the habeas simply
mhm,
because you may have recently seen, well, not you because you're away right now, but one of the things that Stephen Miller, right, from Trump's administration is talking
mhm,
about is
yeah.
actually doing away with habeas petitions altogether, which, by the way, is nothing shy of a due process violation. I mean,
Mhm,
it's remarkable to me. You're not talking about every habeas petition or 90% of habeas petitions that are filed are granted. Out of like every 10,000, maybe 5, 10 are actually granted, give or take. So you're not talking about some crazy, number and improper usage of habeas, and to want to do away with it simply so that the administration can do away with any violations, any challenges in the court for their unconstitutional actions. And again, I'm going to do the Trump weave. I'm going to bring it all together. Look at what's going on right now, right? Look at what's
Yeah.
going on, Malcolm, right now with New Jersey, where they went after the mayor, right? Ross Baraka. They ended up just dropping the charges, but now they're going after the Congresswoman, LaMonica, right? They're going after her for violating the ICE detention facility, even though she had the right to be there, absolute legal right to be there. Look at what they're doing, for example, like in Chicago and in other places as well, where they're going after, judges, they're going after members of Congress, they're going after individuals. Look at even what they're doing to these students based upon illegal protesting. I mean, these as concepts are not just dangerous, they're unconstitutional. They're violative of our laws. They're violative of due process. And the only way in many of these cases to get due process is to bring a habeas petition before the courts. So if you do away with them, what do you got? What's your
I actually had been following all of that because believe me, I had to. You cannot close your eyes to news of what's going on in the United States when you're overseas. All right, you come back and be arrested on spot. But I saw today a video clip of I believe it was Senator Hassan of of Minnesota. No, not Minnesota. She's from New Hampshire, and she was grilling Kristi Noem yesterday. And Christina, she asked her straight, do you know what habeas corpus is? And she goes, habeas corpus is an absolute right that the president of the United States has to execute against, American citizens. And the senator was floored. She goes, no, you're wrong. That is not what it is. Noam was saying that this is habeas. This woman is so ignorant. She's saying habeas corpus is a power of the president, as opposed to it being what you just said, right? The right to show that there is a crime that has been committed and that you have a right to that process. So here's the head of Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, Michael, I don't know if you've been in an airport recently trying to get on an international flight, but as you're going through the security checkpoints at JFK, they play a video of her with her Goldilocks or whatever over and over. Of Kristi Noem, like she's some sort of reality talking about Department of Homeland Security's responsibility for keeping America safe. And the only thing that was missing was the green screen picture of the CCOT prison in El Salvador, right? And I wanted to ask the TSA agents because they're all frustrated. You got to sit here and watch this over your head all day, right? Literally, Kristi Noem. But yesterday she couldn't tell you the definition of habeas corpus. And then when Senator Hassan said, "Well, do you support habeas corpus?" She went into her little banter, and finally Senator Hassan goes, "No, I'm asking you, will you in your department recognize habeas corpus?" And she would not say yes. She went into her little, well, it's a right of the president to da 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 da. Oh my God, cult-like behavior. So
Malcolm, on our
mm,
Substack Thursday,
mm.
we actually spoke about the cosplay that's
Oh
taking
yeah,
place right now in this administration. When you see Kristi Noem as an example, getting dressed up in ICE gear, holding a fully automatic AR-15, standing in front of a bunch of stripped out men in their, down to their boxers with all of
right,
their tattoos, and so on. Basically, gaslighting the American public to
right.
continue to believe the nonsense that's coming out of this administration, that these folks, all of them, every single one of them, are murderers, drug dealers, rapists, they're animals, they're gang members, and so on, when we already know that I think it's 60% of them that have been disappeared, have no criminal record at all.
Hmm.
And that's the point. I talked about in my Substack post the other day when I wrote this on this, and I was like, in the Torah, we always talk about that to save one life is like saving the world.
Yeah, all humanity. Yeah.
And it's in the Midrash. And I gotta tell you, this is what we are all doing. And I don't want to sound, silly, and I don't want to sound being hyperbolic. Our goal, you, me, Lev, folks like Norm, like Harry Littman, like Rick Wilson, like Don Lemon, like Jim Acosta, like my buddy Jolly Good Ginger. Our goal is to build like the Midas Touch Network, right? With Ben, Jordy, and Brett. Our goal is to build a massive, massive community. And you say, why? Because only by creating a ballot box revolution does this democratic republic have a shot. And, I warned everybody in 2018, 2 years before it happened, that my biggest fear is that if Donald Trump lost the election, that there would never be a peaceful transfer in power. And holy shit, exactly what I said came true. I also told you that he would never want to give up power, and he has no intention, that he has no respect for the law or the Constitution. Now, let me be clear. One thing I say all the time as well, I don't hate Donald Trump for being Donald Trump. I hate the policies that he is enacting with these executive orders that, by the way, he didn't design, he didn't investigate, he didn't do homework on, he hasn't read memos or briefings on. This is all coming out of Project 2025. And anybody that thinks that I'm wrong, I beg you, go read Project 2025. It's a 922-page manifesto on how to destroy America's democracy and turn it into an authoritarian regime. That's just what it is. And they are doing it.
It's underway.
One by one. It's a playbook.
Right. Yeah, and it's happening. It's happening. It's just before our eyes. My favorite part of this is the utter shamelessness, and we talk about this all the time. They have a masters of the universe attitude. They own America, and by extension, they think they own the world, and they will do whatever the fuck they want to do. And that's why Trump is making all these, statements by fiat, right? But I think you said that this wasn't always the way he did business, right?
No, and that saddens me, to be very honest with you. It saddens me because this isn't the Donald Trump that I knew. Yeah, we fucked over contractors. If there is any of your followers, right, your listeners that turn around and say, oh my God, I can't believe he fucked over a contractor. Fuck you. All right. Let me be very clear. If they didn't do the right job, by the way, even if they did do the right job, that's the nature of New York real estate. Every single real estate developer will turn around and tell you the same thing. The contractors, they start out, they overcharge you because they know that at the end that they're going to get fucked out of 20% of the deal. That's just common, right? Okay, maybe we went a little overboard and we fucked them for a lot more than that. But nobody cares about the contractors or the painters or or the suppliers. That has nothing. It has no effect upon your life. What does have effect upon your life is due process. What does have effect upon your life is a president who's willing to accept a $400 million gift and think it's okay. It's not okay. It's also to have a president that doesn't believe that people should have First Amendment constitutional rights if, in fact, they are critical of him. It's not okay. It's not okay to have a president who turns around and believes, women shouldn't have their own reproductive decision-making rights, or black and brown people shouldn't even have the right to vote, or that, on and on, that people don't have the right to peacefully protest simply because it's a belief that you don't want out there because your base, your MAGA base, isn't in lockstep with it. These are not normal. These aren't even Trump ideologies. He's cosplaying president using Heritage Foundation as the guide. And by the way, he's not moral. He's not religious. He's just Donald. He's a self-motivated narcissist, and that's okay. There are plenty of, in fact, most politicians are narcissists. If you think about it, just from the very essence, you think that you should be a leader of this country? What a narcissistic ideology. Well, they all have a form of narcissism. His goes to a whole nother level, but so what? He was elected president of the United States. And I say this all the time, and I truly mean it. As president of the United States, he has the right to implement policy that he believes is right for this country. And nobody has the right to tell a president that your policy, is wrong. Every president has the right to put forth their agenda. However, where I draw the line on that one is when that agenda is both unconstitutional and designed within which to destroy our democratic republic. Look, let me be very clear. There are dozens of policies that George Bush was putting forth, Barack Obama, right?
It's the presidential prerogative.
Or Trump in his, or Bush 1, or even Ronald Reagan, right? I mean, there are dozens of policies. There are ones that I like and ones that I dislike. But we have to draw the line when it comes to policies that make us regress back to 50, 60, 100 years. We're supposed to be progressing, not regressing. And that's what Heritage is putting forth in Donald Trump's ear, is all of these regressive policies, whether you are marginalized community, whether you're female. What this group wants, point blank, is something MAGA Mike Johnson turned around and said. They want a white, Christian, male, dominated America.
A Christian nationalist.
Christian nationalist America.
Well, Mike, I put it this way. Donald Trump now, with the powers that he has and the enabling that he's been given, is a drunk monkey with hand grenades and an AK-47, spinning in circles, just shooting and blasting and making loud noises and laughing the whole time. Heritage gave him the machine gun, the alcohol, and the hand grenades, right? Yes. I mean, literally designed the destruction of America as a constitutional, inclusive, multicultural, multilingual, whatever you want, democracy to a white supremacist-led ethno-Christian state. Literally the Handmaid's Tale. Okay? Yeah. And it's just fascinating to me how the deference the news media is giving him.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's not jump off of that topic, Malcolm. I don't mean to hijack your show.
No, I want you. This is your hour.
This is an extremely important topic. We cannot just ignore the fact that the media is complicit in all of this bullshit. And I say that not respectfully either. All right. I say it as a means to explain why, for example, our Substack gets as many views as, for example, MSNBC or CNN. That, my show, for example, on YouTube with Ben Meiselas is #1 in the world on YouTube during that hour. We beat everybody out. Why? Because with us, you're not getting the spin. We're not worried about advertisers pulling money so that the companies can't then give dividends to their shareholders and so on.
Right.
This is not how you report the news based upon who your advertisers are and whether they're going to pull their advertising budget from you.
Right. Yeah, you're
It
beholden
is
to no one but the truth.
right. And this is the biggest problem that we have. I'll give you an example. And
Mm.
I love the fact that you're doing this, right? This show, because it's so important. When we watch these, what do we want to call them? These stupid press briefings
Yeah.
of Caroline Levitt, where if you ask a question that she doesn't like, the anger and the commentary, which is pre-scripted, pre-written. She does a great job in protecting Trump, right? But
Right.
you cannot defend the indefensible. Even worse than her press room briefings, when Trump did these press conferences in the Oval Office or on the side when he starts taking questions from individuals, or on Air Force One. They are filled with so much misinformation, disinformation, and
Right.
malinformation that you don't know whether to bang your head against the wall or just to drill a hole through your ears,
Right.
because it is so infuriating when the president of the United States has no compunction in terms of lying to you, to your face, point blank, saying stuff that we all know is not true. He knows isn't true, but then again, it fits into the narrative. But why I blame the media,
Mm.
they don't call it out.
That's right. I mean,
Malcolm, ask me a question. Let's role play this shit so that your
well,
listeners, all right, your viewers understand just
sure.
how disgusting this is. And the fact that mainstream, lamestream cable news media, they don't follow up with questions or do the right thing.
Yeah.
Turn around,
Well,
call the bullshit out, pick yourself up, and walk out and say, I'm not going to report. I'm not going to waste my time sitting here asking you questions, knowing, go ahead. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
okay. Because she gave a classic one yesterday,
No, I don't
right?
mean,
Nope.
I don't even mean Caroline. Let's
Oh,
go
you just want a
Trump. Let's
question.
go full on Trump.
Mr. Trump, how did the call go with Vladimir Putin?
I thought it was a great call. It was excellent. We spent, a lot of time, talking about it. I know he wants to make a deal, right? And we're going to continue, and we will make a deal. Putin wants to make a deal, and then you're saying to yourself, no, he doesn't. No,
Right.
you know for a fact he doesn't. In fact, right after the call, he was on his own Pravda television station, which in Russian means truth, which has
Right.
no semblance to the title of that news station. But
Right.
he's out there turning around saying that he intends to win this war. Now, let's break this down for a second. Vladimir Putin thought that they were going to win this war in 3 days.
Mhm.
Equally as ludicrous was Trump's comments about being able to bring this war to an end within 24 hours of taking office, because in his mind, Vladimir Putin respects him. So when a journalist turns around and says to Trump, well, or maybe they should say it more often, Mr. President, on August of 2024, part of your campaign slogan was you were going to end this Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours.
Mhm.
It's simple. Any great negotiator can do this. Sir, those weren't my words. Those are yours. Do you acknowledge that diplomacy is more difficult than you were selling during your campaign? Imagine the comment that you would get. He would turn around and say, Malcolm, what company are you with? And you say ABC, CBS,
You're dating.
CNN, MSNBC, right? Of course you ask a stupid question like that, right?
Yeah.
It's your fake news. No, it's not fake news. And then the problem is that journalist doesn't
Right.
turn around and say, get up and say, Mr. President, let me say it once again, because somewhere along the line, it's not registering with you.
Right.
These
Right.
are not my words. It's not CNN, MSNBC,
It's
ABC,
your
CBS.
words.
It's your words. Now, I'm more than happy to Google and show you the clip of you saying it, if that, of course,
Yeah.
would refresh your memory, right? But
Do you recall the interview that he had with Irish news or Irish television in like 2018 when he was on his way to Helsinki? And that woman ripped him a new one. Every time he lied, she was all over him, you know? And I don't think he's ever had a foreign interview since. But why is it? Is everyone cowed? It's not a question of complicit. I think that they are terrified of losing their jobs and being kicked out of the White House press room. What do you think?
okay. So I'd rather personally be kicked out of the press room, not
With honor.
invited to the Oval Office, or right, not even permitted on Air Force One, than to
With
sit there, ask you a question. Mr. President, how was your breakfast this morning? Oh, it was great. It was great. I'm the
Yeah.
healthiest president ever. Just ask
Yeah.
Ronnie Johnson, right?
Yeah.
By the way, folks, again, his last name is Jackson, right? But
Yeah.
things like that. That's what he wants. He just wants to stand up there, and he wants people so he could point to them. You. No, you. Go ahead. Don't say that to the president.
It's all Trump show.
You don't speak like that to the president. It's like,
Right.
No. I'm not being rude, sir. I'm not being discourteous. I'm being factual.
Mhm.
On so-and-so days, because these journalists easily do their own homework. They write the questions out. Do your fucking homework. Turn around and say, Mr. President, on so-and-so date, again repeated on so-and-so date, and repeated on this date, 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 this date. These are the words that you said, almost exact to one another, that you would be able to finish this war, to settle this conflict, this war within 24 hours. You also brought up how stupid Joe Biden and his administration was, that it never would have happened under your leadership.
Right.
Again, will you acknowledge that diplomacy is more difficult than what you anticipated?
Right.
It's a simple answer. How about just say yes? He can't do that. Cannot do that.
I know. Caroline Levitt yesterday pulled a great one where the guy said, hey, the CBO says you're going to increase the deficit by X trillion dollars. And right out of her mouth, she goes, no, it's not. And they scored this thing at like $5 to $10 trillion or something. It's going to like explode the deficit. And as a cult, she's the last person she talks to, right? Is supposed to be the president. Before she comes to that press conference. Do they sit there and actually come to an agreement? Or does she just read the boss?
No. There's no agreement. They give her talking points, and she marches perfectly to it. Listen, she's great at being bullshit Barbie.
Right.
By the way, remember, I've been around Trump for over 15 years.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I've seen people come and go. I have never seen anybody with her skill set of lies, misinformation, and disinformation. And the way that
really,
that she is hands
Better
down.
than Huckabee Sanders?
Oh my God, not even close. Not
Ooh.
even close. Sarah's like on the 30-yard line. She's already scored the touchdown. That's how
I
far
see.
apart that they are. But another question that I get insulted that journalists don't turn around and
Mhm.
ask. So, Mr. President, first you said it's 5 trillion, then it's 7 trillion, it could be 10 trillion coming in from foreign investments that you have already brought into the United States. When you say that you've brought it in, can you clarify whether there's actually $10 trillion of investable cash money sitting in a bank account in the
Right.
United States, or are these actually verbal commitments?
Right.
All right.
Yeah, he's going to bullshit me. He's going to.
But nobody holds him to that. And let me
Of
be
course not.
right. Not only is it not in cash money, all
Mhm.
right. On top of that, they don't even have legitimate commitments. Oh my God, he keeps talking about the Boeing deal for like 200 aircrafts, right? For some
Right.
$200 billion deal. That's Boeing. When did the United States become the owner or a shareholder of Boeing? He's
Yeah.
out
Well.
there selling Boeing because he has Boeing stock.
Yeah. Okay. So the corruption becomes very apparent, whenever it's in his personal interest. Listen, I know we have limited time, and I have one question I've been dying to ask you because not only are you a lawyer, you know Donald Trump the best, and now you've noticed the differences in how he behaves. I just came from Greenland. They are very, very worried that he's going to order an armed seizure because obviously people aren't going to just surrender and bow down. They're very proud. They have Danish passports. There's a lot of Danes up there that live in there. But what is his mindset towards the use of military force? I've heard conflicting things that he's afraid of force, he's afraid of having people killed, or that now he's getting a taste for it. Or Stephen Miller will say, whisper in his ear and go, seized Greenland, greatest president to expand the size of the United States in U.S. history. What's your opinion?
Well, it's a great question, Malcolm.
Mm.
What Trump won't do for a good Danish, I'm not really sure. Does that
Ah,
mean that
that's
does that
freaking
mean
dad jokes on Black Man Spy.
does that mean that he's not a cheese Danish lover? It's more of like a cinnamon Danish. But
Yes,
do I think that he'll go so far as to create an incursion? It's too early to
mm,
say. Like, he would prefer that they just turn over the country to him, right? The problem is, and you would know this as a spy, right? As
mhm,
a somebody in that world.
mhm,
If in fact that there was an incursion to take Greenland,
mhm.
who would come to Greenland's defense?
Well, that's real intelligence, right? He would had this, when they talk about increasing intelligence collection on Denmark and Greenland, that is it's the only question that he would need answered. What will Denmark do? What will the rest of NATO do? Will they write me a letter? Will they invoke NATO Article 4, which is, supposed to be a negotiated agreement because two NATO nations, or one is dealing in the internal affairs of another, or is it Article 5 where they call for the collective armed defense
Exactly.
of Denmark? Because this isn't by the way, this ain't the American seizure of Greenland. It's the American Danish war.
Right.
That's what it
Let me,
would be. Because by the way, there's cops there with guns. You're
yeah.
going to have to kill them or shoot them or seize them. And, you could do it with a special operations mission in a matter of hours. You could. If you have loyal troops, a couple of hundred loyal troops, you could seize Nuuk Airport, Greenland, and the city of Nuuk. It's about the size of half
There's
the block in New York City to
60,000.
try.
there's a mere 60,000 people living in
We,
the entire country.
the things the
You know,
size of the East Coast, everything from the Mississippi East.
I
That's
mean,
how big it
we have
is.
more police officers in New York City than they have population.
They
So
did true.
this would not be some major war that would go on. This thing would be over probably before nightfall. I want to
Unfortunately,
it
they have out of the 60,000 people, they have 30,000 caribou hunting sniper rifles, and they're good
exactly.
at them.
Well, understood.
My
That's
question is he as bloody minded these days? Does he have this imperial thing in his head where he goes, I'm going to do this? Stephen Miller says we can do this in an hour.
so the
Chairman of
answer
the
is
Joint Chiefs
yeah.
of Staff says we can do it.
So
Would he
the
do it?
answer is yes. He does have the imperial mindset, but no, I don't believe that he wants the incursion. He wants the imperial mindset. He wants the expansionist mindset, but he wants, like with Canada, to become the 51st state willingly. That
How?
Donald asked for it, right? It's like Ramses from the movie the what do you call it? From
Ten
the Ten
Commandments.
Commandments, when he turns around and he goes, "So it has been said, so it shall be done." Right? Trump speaks, and he thinks that they're going to just hand over a deed to Greenland, right? And it will now become part of the United States of America. On the same ideology, in the same vision of Greenland, Trump sees that with Canada as well. Canada also has a very limited military force. So in his mind, he thinks by threatening them, by saying, we can take you over tomorrow, our Salvation Army could kick your ass, right? That means that Canada, that Carney or his predecessor, right, Trudeau, I'm going to turn around and say, Donald, they turn around, they manufacture some gigantic Canadian key, right, made of solid gold and diamonds, and they get down on one knee with a velvet pillow and they turn it over to him. Oh, Imperial Trump, right? The return of the Lord's child. We present to you the key to Canada. Please welcome us into your domain. That's what Trump is hoping for.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I think that any of this is going to happen? No. Will he continue to talk about it? Yes.
Okay. Well, what happens if he doesn't get what he wants? I mean, he's got this thing in his head now of expanding the United States territory. All of his sycophants are popping up there. Steve Bannon is supposed to be going there. So, which means that they're preparing the groundwork. But what if he
Listen,
doesn't
I
get it?
truly hope
He
that
just
Steve
walks
Bannon.
away.
Well, I know Steve Bannon a pretty long time, and I can tell you, sometimes Steve does things, or I should say, most of the time, he does things for publicity, right? So he's not going over there to engage in conversation with their parliament, to discuss a peaceful surrender on behalf of the United States of America, right? In violation of the Hatch Act and the Logan, Act. You just can't do things like that. They're not willing to turn it over. So he's going there to make a statement, a visual statement that he will then run on his podcast and his shows and so on. They show Trump that he's still the loyal Steve Bannon because this is part of his idea.
Okay.
I hope that he takes precautions because these folks are not happy with this. Don Jr. was smart with J.D. Vance. They stayed on the U.S. military base. They didn't go out as they said that they were doing in order to go meet the people. They had people brought in who were already vetted, some of whom weren't even, Greenlanders either. I mean, the whole thing is, it's all show.
That base is 1,000 miles over ice. It's 1,000 miles to the capital. That's how big this thing is. The base would be like remote Maine, and the capital would be Tampa.
Right.
you know, only over a 1 mile deep sheet of ice. There's
Yeah.
nothing in between it, also. So I just find this fascinating. But well, I appreciate your perspective on that because I wanted to know: is there are there people who are moving him because to see force as a more viable alternative as president now that he is the imperial president and the king of the United States?
Well, there are a lot of people that are doing it. I mean, let's not forget one of the things that they're talking about right now is
Mhm.
the Golden Dome. And again,
Yeah.
as I wrote in my
What
Substack,
the hell?
yeah, as I wrote in my Substack, it's not the radioactive pelt that's attached to the top of his head. We're talking about a defense system that would basically be a fence over the entire country to protect us from ICBMs from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea, and China, right? And
Yes, but
I get it. I get it. But of course, it has to be gold because Israel's Iron Dome, what's worth more, iron or gold? Right? Iron is kind
it's
of like a wasted metal. It's what you use in order to create rebar, right, for
but this
construction.
this is $1 trillion give money grab because you can't defend against those things. You can't.
Well,
You
I'm
sent
not.
five
I'm not
thousand.
sure. I'm not sure about that, right? But
Mm,
here's the point. Right now, the United States has how many nuclear missiles? How many
five
nuclear
thousand.
devices? 5,000. Imagine if only half of them were deployed and
Yeah. Or
struck the intended targets.
hmm
Or how about 20% or
hmm
10%? You would wipe out all humanity. In
5%.
fact, you would wipe out all of humanity. The earth
Hmm.
would become uninhabitable.
Right.
Who
So
in their right mind wants to do such a thing?
right, the madman theory, mutual assured destruction. Russia is not going to chuck its 5,000 nuclear missiles at us. And if you spend $1 trillion a year, it doesn't matter. 5% gets through, end of the world.
By the
Right?
way,
So
even
what
if
is the whole
none get
purpose
through,
of this?
well,
Right,
Malcolm, let me take one thing even further for your viewers and your listeners here.
right.
Even if none of them get through,
There
they
you go.
manage to create this golden dome, and you end up destroying all of these nuclear warheads
Hmm.
in the air.
Hmm.
What happens to the nuclear fallout?
Yeah, falls
You
on you.
think that it has to hit the ground in order for it to become damaging? In
Yeah.
fact, how stupid that nobody so far has called them out and said, "Do you know that if hypothetically the nuke goes off in North Korea,
Hmm.
you understand that the United States shares oxygen, right,
Yeah.
with North Korea. So, yeah, maybe it's going to be worse for them, but you're contaminating the air, which circulates the entire globe, which means that it ultimately ends up in your food supply, in your water supply, and so on. It is
Right.
mutually assured destruction of
Right. And
humanity.
And also, electromagnetic pulse is just a nuke going off before interception
Right.
at an angle over your target. So they could black out, they could send us back to the 19th century, right? The beginning of the 19th century, with, with exception of a few military bases, and before the interceptors could ever even get there. And
And
then that you could have air space bursts, high altitude nuclear bursts, which would rain down radioactivity. This is a crazy story. My point is that, you know, that somebody has gotten into Trump's head and said, "Hey, there's boatloads of money that we could have here, even though a Golden Dome system just wouldn't be work or viable."
you
But
know,
that's a trillion, half a
Malcolm,
trillion a year.
it's true. Yeah, 500 billion, half a trillion a year. In my Substack the other day, I wrote about
Mhm,
it. I turned around and I said, let me be very clear about something.
mhm.
That $500 billion, if put to use, would eradicate homelessness in America
Absolutely.
It would fund every single program from SNAPs to children's food programs to education in every single state school. It would literally give you the ability to rebuild every bridge, every
Hmm.
road, every tunnel that's right
Yeah.
now in need of major repair. It would be able to provide broadband to every single home in America for free.
Mhm.
So I have an idea. I have an idea. Let's waste it on something that will never be used, should never be used. We already have enough military might to crack the earth in half.
Right.
What more do we need?
I don't know. But I will tell you this. This reminds me of something that I heard about Vladimir Putin, which is there will, Putin wants to be this imperial president, but he will never have a Putinoburg, right? There will never be, after he dies, any monument to him. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, same thing. Elon Musk never. It's just he's going to fade from history, but Donald Trump isn't getting his face on Mount Rushmore because he decided to peace through strength and Iron Dome and destroy the fabric of America. But I think his enablers all are telling him he's going up next to Lincoln.
Yeah.
If you build Iron Dome, if you get this airplane from Qatar, the alternate reality that they live in does not compute with the real reality the other 8 billion people in this world have. He could have been Elon, it's like Elon Musk. He could have been like Steve Jobs or the president, the owner of Microsoft. His name's failing me right now. Bill
Bill
Gates,
Gates.
and
Bill
he could
Gates
have
or
said, "I'm eliminating yellow fever, cholera, and malaria in Africa." And he would be honored and hailed. But he's got this thing in his head, and none of us can penetrate that. So with that, I just want to let you go. We went over, but I love listening to you. And now listen, for everybody who is hearing the sound of my voice or seeing me in a podcast, please go to the Mea Culpa podcast. Michael Cohen spouts off his words of wisdoms all the time. His Substack is incredible. I'm going to go read that article about Iron Dome
yeah.
because I knew about it. I knew about it from the professional view. How do you launch, counter launch against ballistic missiles? But you're right. The man could have been a mensch of humanity.
He
He
could
could
have
have
been a
flipped his reputation.
transformational president like this
Transformational.
country hasn't seen in a long time, right?
Of
Yeah,
the
he's
Republican FDR.
right. Let's just turn around and say that he's not standard, and that could
Right.
actually have been a good thing. But
Yeah.
his non-traditional nature is being
Mhm.
used not to aid America, not to help the world, but to destroy it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
to be honest with you, knowing him as well as I do, I don't understand why he's doing this.
yeah. To quote the immortal movie Batman,
Some people just want to burn the world
want to
down.
see the world burn
Yeah,
and enjoy the show. That's the part that they didn't put in the movie, right?
right.
Michael, thank you for coming on the Black Man Spy podcast. It was super interesting and engaging, and I'm glad I listened to it. And I really, really have to go see your Substack now to read that article and all your other articles and listen to your Substack lives. I love being on with you and Lev every
Yeah,
Thursday in the Unleashed portion, Substack Unleashed, and your YouTube channel is with Ben Meiselas, right?
yep.
And that's also Mea Culpa.
That is not. That's called
Oh,
political beatdown.
political beatdown.
Yeah.
That's a great name. Uh, but I really wish we had more time. We're going to have you back again, I'm certain, at some
Anytime,
point in the
Malcolm.
future, because chaos and mayhem comes in all shapes and forms. But you're one of the very few people. Whenever I say I know someone that knows Trump, I'm talking about you. And I think that people are not listening to you because the juxtaposition of how he was and how he is today is
True.
valuable information. So thank you for coming on again. And
Always.
thanks for giving us this hour.
Always. See you soon, brother.
All right. Take care, bro.
Safe travels.
That was yet another incredible segment. I don't know how I get these guests. I don't know why they like me, but they like to come on. And guys like Michael Cohen and Glenn Kirshner and Brian Tyler Cohen. It's just absolutely amazing. And I'm glad that you could be here for this week's episode of Black Man Spy. Be sure to tune in next week. This one will be amazing. It is, if you're watching on YouTube, it'll have the footage from Greenland and the people that I interviewed and discussions about what is going on in the crisis between Greenland and the United States. And you will find it is now turned into this amazing travel log where I walk and talk and actually catch fish for their roe with Greenlanders and show you a beautiful, pristine country, which for some strange reason, the United States has decided they're just going to take. So that being said, I will give you and leave you with the quote of the week. And the quote of the week, almost invariably on Black Man Spy, comes from Rudyard Kipling, because I am a proud member of the Kipling Society. And in that very small group of people in England and around the world, I'm certain appreciate that. You can all join the Kipling Society if you wish. But I love the writings of Rudyard Kipling. And this one is one for all of us. He wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." With that, I want to thank you for coming on Black Man Spy, because I know you're the kind of person who knows that there is no price too high for owning yourself and learning what is going on in the world around you. And it's not always just geopolitics, it's sometimes cultural, personal, linguistic, and philosophical and spiritual. And that, or those components, are all key elements of understanding the world around you. And that's called intelligence. And it's a critical component of understanding not only the Black men spies, but all the other kind of people who are operating in the intelligence community, trying to bring you that ground truth. So be sure to tune back in next week on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Come see me on Substack. I've been doing a day-to-day analysis of what I've been doing, showing pictures and videos, especially the video of me going through an iceberg field for 7 hours. Man, was that entertaining. When the stress gets too hard, you just go to sleep and then you wake up and you're still in the crisis. That's sort of what happened to me. But you will enjoy that, because it will be a fascinating study. So thank you again, and I hope to see you back here next week.